Hello there, my name is Ashkan Dormishian, and my topic is the samurai. Before I started, I knew very little about the samurai. I knew they were warriors, they had a strict code of honor, and they were from Japan. This little bit I knew I had learned from the movies and TV shows I had seen when I was younger. A brief background on the samurai. The samurai are thought to have started in the late 10th century. It is not known by whom it was first created or exactly in which region it started, but it is well known that the samurai are from Japan. Their purpose was to protect and defend their clan and conquer new land from other clans by direct orders from a superior. The reason they needed to get new land and protect their own land was because Japan didn't have much arable land, so feeding everyone in the clans that were getting bigger was always a struggle. Fun fact: did you know that the sword of the samurai was not originally their main weapon? Actually, their main weapon was the bow and arrow at first. The sword was supposed to embody the samurai's soul, and they rarely ever used them. However, as time passed, the war for land in Japan increased, and more soldiers were needed. Because there was so little arable land, all the land had to be used for food for humans, and not for horses. As a result, only the high-ranked samurai rode horses, and the majority were foot soldiers. These foot soldiers often didn't use the bows and arrows because they weren't very effective on the ground, and instead used weapons like swords, spears, axes, guns, or any other handheld weapon. The samurai's armor. At the same time, the samurai's armor changed to accommodate the foot soldiers. They made their armor lighter and slightly less effective, making it a lot easier for the foot soldiers to move around. Their helmets made an interesting change too. They started as boring, very useful full-face helmets, and changed to intimidating helmets with frightening faces painted on the front, and they still remained as effective. Evolution of weapons. Meanwhile, the samurai sword altered too, and for the better. The sword used to be straight and have a straight, sharp tip. They found out that by making the blade curve all the way to the tip, the sword would have a lot cleaner cut. This change was traced back to the 14th century. By the 16th century, modernized guns had diffused from Europe to Japan, and the samurai tried to incorporate the guns into their fighting style. The samurai did the best they could to adapt, but their fine-tuned skills soon became useless as the war technology would advance. And by the late 19th century, unfortunately, all samurai were gone. The only thing left were artifacts, legends, and their ideals. Japan finally opens up to the West. Matthew C. Perry, also known as Commodore Perry, did this within 2 visits to Japan, the first in 1853 and the second in 1854. Perry left the U.S. with a message from President Millard Fillmore in 1852 and arrived in Japan in 1853. Upon arriving, the U.S. Commodore was not greeted well and was asked to leave by Japan Navy. Commodore Perry ignored these requests and headed full steam towards Japan and demanded to present his negotiation letter. He gave them the letter and promised to return soon for their response. And he did, in 1854. Perry left Japan the second time a happy man. The West could now trade with Japan freely. Once trading began with the West, the legends of the samurai were spread all throughout the world, through word of mouth, artwork, ancient artifacts, and eventually, after much time, movies and comic books, which are also known as manga in Japan. The samurai in Japan today. Unfortunately, the real samurai are non-existent in Japan today. However, people still do practice the same sorts of things that the samurai studied and practiced. For example, people still do train in martial arts, they still get trained to use different weapons, like the sword, and they do practice the same ideals called Bushido. These ideals were a hybrid between Buddhism, which was brought to Japan by the Koreans, and the native Shinto religion. It combined the unearthly portion of Buddhism with the natural aspects of Shinto. This strict code demands loyalty, devotion, obedience, duty, respect, self-sacrifice, and honor until the death. When we see samurai today in the USA, we often see movies with different interpretations of samurai life and struggle, mainly focused on war though. These are the stories that were passed down generation after generation, altered slightly each time they were retold, or stories deduced and created from the art and artifacts that came to the US. We also see TV shows like Power Rangers that give an unrealistic, glamorized, hyped up image of the samurai to the United States citizens. In addition, we see video games. These video games are based off of times of war and just focus on that aspect of life, not the majority, the other 90% of a samurai's life. Samurai are not noblemen anymore. They are seen as Asian killing machines. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed and learned from my presentation. Now to the class activity.